and engage in conversations outside the chambers. The city clerk has an announcement.
If you are here to speak under public comments or on a particular item on the agenda, please fill out a request to speak card located in the back of the rooms. They're blue. And when you completed them, please turn them in to me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember West.
Here.
Councilmember Spriggs.
Here.
Councilmember Aguirre. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Patton.
Here.
Mayor Dedina.
Here. Thank you. And now we have Carla Perez Aguilar from Nicholas Elementary School to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Is Carla here? Oh, there she is. Thank you so much.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we have council announcements, starting with Councilmember West.
Good evening, everybody. So on February 7th, it's been a busy month, I have to admit. So we met as the representative of the Airport Authority. I met on the executive and board meeting on February 7th. We talked about the Terminal 1 expansion and also a new airline agreement that we are working on. It's a really unique time in our history where we can get the airlines to come in and be a part of the solutions to building projects. And they're really excited about being a portion of that. And it's a very interesting time for them to do that. It hasn't always been that way. Most of the time when you have major products or major projects like that, the cities are financing them. So this is great. And then on February 9th, the South Bay Small Business Forum had their Valentine event. Great thing. I hope you all had a great Valentine's. February 10th, San Diego, the regional airport. I'm part of the audit committee. We met that day on February 10th. February 14th, we met the San Diego Regional Airport. As a ground transportation ad hoc committee, we're working on really trying to figure out a way to improve the ground transportation at the airport to include, taxis and TNCs and all the shuttles and all that to make it a really effective way in the future. So met on the 14th and on the 21st because I'm the chair of the ground transportation ad hoc committee. February 22nd, airport. That was our board retreat that we talked about all the things that are moving on in the future. February 23rd, I'm going to let, I bet the mayor is going to probably say something a little bit, but we were really happy to have the National Fitness Campaign. We had our outdoor fitness, the mayor's event. It was a great, all of the council was there. But we had most of the council there, and it was a great event, lots of fun. We had a Ironman and lifeguard firefighter competition. We didn't quite win. Close, but the great thing about it is that we have an agreement to do this again. So the night before the next Ironman, we're going to try to get together and do another event where we can challenge them again. And I have a feeling that we will do much better now. And then on the February 25th, the executive and finance committee for the airport met. 27th, I met. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit more time than I wanted to. But February 27th, we met with the UCSD, the Center for Community Health, Mr. Ramon Hernandez, talking about all the things that are going on. We are promoting a healthy lifestyle in this community, but the numbers don't always add up to a healthy community. Smoking is up in our community. We are higher than the entire San Diego County average and a lot higher than our national average. So it's kind of it is a very dissonant, it hurt my feeling to really see that this is what's happening in our community. I'm just going to give you one little stat. 38% of our community went to a fast food or drive-in restaurant 9 times in a month. So 38% of our community is relying on fast food for one of their major meals today. So that's a very, very telling stat. So we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're working on it. And then lastly, February 28th, I participated in the Regional Task Force on Homelessness led by Councilmember Chris Ward from District 3 in San Diego. I think that this is an easy thing to think about, but homelessness is really, really impacting our communities throughout our county. And I think it comes down to we talked a lot about how housing has to be a solution to this problem. How we have to build more housing to make sure that our homeless are taken care of. And every study out there shows if we can get these people off the street into homes, their lives improves, and it is a less of a burden on our tax people. So it's a challenge though, because not everybody, they aren't coming into these homes, yay, let's build a house, and they run in and do it. It takes a lot more work than that. So, but we have more housing is critical, and we are going to meet again to do so. That's it.
Member Sprague.
Thanks. I'll hit the highlights. On the 21st, I led a conference call with the Coastal Cities group of the League of California Cities. There's 61 coastal cities, and there's one person from each of the 6 coastal districts on a leadership committee. And we hold monthly conference calls to look at what are the policies coming down from the Coastal Commission, from the state legislature, et cetera, that affect coastal cities, including Imperial Beach. And we have an opportunity to comment on the development of the next 5-year strategic plan for the Coastal Commission, which is going to include a lot of policies and approaches that are going to affect us from this year on through 2024. So we're working on comments, and I'm drafting them right now that can be approved by the 61 cities and into the Coastal Commission by the 18th of this month, which is the deadline for the submission of comments. Our whole approach is we want collaboration with the Coastal Commission rather than dictation from the Coastal Commission. We want an understanding that our environmental concerns in the cities are just as strong as the Coastal Commission's environmental mandates under the Coastal Act. But we have a lot of other considerations to deal with, our economic conditions, our social conditions that we're trying to improve, housing, as Councilmember West mentioned, et cetera. Some of these local goals and objectives might not necessarily be consistent with what the Coastal Commission is trying to do. And some of the things the Coastal Commission wants us to do are not consistent with what other state agencies are asking us to do. So trying to harmonize these things is what we're urging the Commission to do in its next 5-year strategy. I don't know how many of you attended. How many of you attended the State of the City Monday a week ago? All right. Well, you know that it was a great success. There was a tremendous turnout. I'm sure all of us were really pleased to see so many folks from the community turn out. The mayor did a great job presenting the state of the city. And I think it was the most tightly run and short state of the city of any of those that I've been to, including ours in the past. So congratulations, Mayor. You know, you got the point across and everybody had an early night. Tomorrow, I have an important meeting of the Metro Wastewater Commission Joint Powers Authority's subcommittee on selecting a new general counsel for the Metro Commission. There are a lot of very, very tough legal issues coming up that involve interfacing with San Diego and its massive multi-billion-dollar pure water program, and how much of that we, the participating agencies and the surrounding cities, are going to have to pay for, and what rights we have when they want to let huge contracts, for example, rights to review those contracts, et cetera. So there's a tremendous amount of legal work to be done, and a lot of protection of our rights and our ratepayers' concerns to be done. So that'll be tomorrow. We'll be reviewing all of the applicants that have submitted proposals to be the general counsel, the new general counsel, and making recommendations to the Metro JPA at its next meeting. So those are some of the things that I've been involved in.
Good evening, everyone. So I met with US EPA's Region 9 Administrator on February 7th, Michael Stoker. He is very much aware of all the infrastructure needs that we have here in the San Diego-Tijuana border region. specifically regarding wastewater and trash. He said that he briefed the Deputy Administrator, Andrew Wheeler of the EPA, about all of these ongoing pollution issues and the need for more funding for wastewater infrastructure.
And now Mr. Wheeler is the EPA director, is that right?
Deputy Administrator, yes.
Oh.
And then on February 14th, I attended our Metropolitan Transit System board meeting where we discussed and approved the Joint Development Program. That's basically what we're working on is updating that program. And what the Joint Development Program guides MTS staff on all matters relating to MTS. And we also discussed and approved the legislative agenda for 2019, including federal and state legislation. Some of the federal priorities focus on advocating for increased transit funding, public safety, and regulation matters. And then on February 26th, I had the great honor of touring our coastal campus, the Navy Coastal Campus. They're making great progress. I was incredibly impressed with all the amazing training that our most elite are receiving. And like I said, they're making great progress. They're on target. And I was just so incredibly impressed with the work that they're doing there. So thank you very much for that. And then lastly, I just came back last night. I traveled to DC to meet with a number of congressional representatives from both San Diego and the entire border region to brief them on the severity of all the cross-border pollution impacting our beaches, our environment, our economy, and our quality of life. I had a request. We requested an increase in funding for EPA's Border Wastewater Infrastructure Program. This was a program created after NAFTA was signed 20 years ago to address some of the environmental impacts that would result from free trade. Sadly, it was originally funded at $100 million, and that funding has dwindled over time to $10 million. In fact, last Congress, they actually eliminated that program. And thanks to Senator Feinstein, who championed this program, we were able to save it. So this time around, I met, like I said, with a number of different representatives asking them to increase funding for that program. That program can go to fund wastewater infrastructure improvements, specifically like the coastal the collector that collapsed in Tijuana, December 17th. It's been sending us, I don't know, tens of millions of gallons per day of sewage into our coastline. So this program, the Border Wastewater Infrastructure Program, can go to fund those improvements. In fact, it could have improved that collector that collapsed, and we could have had that situation prevented. So lastly, I plan on doing the same thing at the end of the month. We will be traveling to Mexico City and meeting with Mexican officials so that they also pick up the slack and do their part and fund all this wastewater infrastructure that's causing us all of these headaches. So I look forward to advocating on your behalf and reporting our results during our next council meeting. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and good evening. We had a workshop for the council that was open to the public a couple weeks ago, and it lasted about 2.5 hours, and I thought it was very productive. And we do that once a year, and we kind of look at what we want to do for the following year. State of the City was great. The outdoor gym was fantastic, and I'd really like to know when the next outdoor gym's going up and where.
You know, Oklahoma City has 10 or 11 of them.
Right, so we need more. We need more. The Yoga Fest was fantastic. Like last year, it got rained on a little. It was packed, and so I did the downward dog, a cat, a warrior, a happy baby, and a half pigeon. And the half pigeon was so hard, I couldn't imagine what a whole pigeon was. But anyway, the Yoga Fest was great, and I'd like to see that come back again for sure. Do you guys know what a half pigeon is? It's hard. No, I'll be stuck. The Hess Brewery opened up on Seacoast. I haven't been there yet, but every time I drive by, it's packed. So that's something new we have on Seacoast. On the Strand, there's a new traffic light that we did not put in. However, we would like feedback. So any feedback that you have about that traffic light, we'd like to hear from you. And then upcoming March 8th, the South Bay School District is holding their district champions, where they nominate school leaders, community leaders, staff, teachers, and it's at the public library. And also one last thing, go to the city website to take a survey about safe routes in Imperial Beach. And that survey should take 5 minutes or so. That's it.
Great, thank you. Just you guys pretty much covered everything. I just want to thank city staff and the council for a great State of the City. It was really definitely a team effort. So thank you very much. Really appreciate all the work that went into that. So that was great. And then just to comment on the Yoga Festival was absolutely really a great event, and despite the weather. And then I was at the Mike Hess Brewery on Sunday afternoon. We had tacos there, not beer but tacos, and we actually took the tacos to. It was so crowded. We took the tacos to the end of Date Street. My son and his girlfriend were here from college, so that was really nice, really nice. Talking to Mike Hess, so we're looking forward to phase 2 of that project. But I didn't realize they're going to open phase 1. So, I think everybody was surprised at how quickly it got open. So, yeah. So anyway, that's it. Great. Thanks everybody. Staff, any report?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, Councilman West, I don't know. Those are probably averages. 9 times a month. I've been to fast food 9 times this week. I know you probably can't tell, but so I drive. And I thought it was a yogurt fest. I didn't know it was a yoga fest, so I messed that up.
Andy, it was, we want to make sure you're a Chula Vista resident. That's why you weren't counted in our numbers.
Oh, slam down. Exactly. Sorry. Hey, we wanted to announce that on April 29th, we'll be having an open house. That's our regular, we're preparing the budget right now, and we want to make sure that we're hearing from residents. We're going to do it a little bit different this year. In the past, we've done it over in Veterans Park, and this year we're going to do it in this building. Because as you know, we've remodeled this building, so we want the public to be able to come in, do an open house, see the new offices and whatnot. And then in this room, there'll be reoccurring training on either the budget, I think the LCP. There'll be a series of things going on. So again, that's on the 29th of April, and that'll be from 5 until 7 o'clock in this building. So we'll look forward to hearing from the public about the preparation of the budget. It's hard to believe, but we're preparing our next 2-year budget. It's already been 2 years since we did that. So, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, we have the public comment period of the evening. And now we have Megan Walsh for the Sierra Service Project has a presentation.
A little taller than the last person, I guess. Thank you, staff and council, for welcoming Sierra Service Project, not only tonight, but over the summers. This is our second summer participating here and being welcomed by the city. And I'm Megan Walsh, the Executive Director of Sierra Service Project, and I'm here today with our co-directors for this upcoming summer, Angelina Maniti and Joseph Makunga, and they will also share part of this time with me. So the goal for this is to share what we've done in the past year and then also looking forward, what our plans are and also how to engage the rest of the community in our activities. So Imperial Beach, our focus here is about 1/5 of our operations during the summer. So we host about 1,600 volunteers during the course of each summer. We've been around since the 70s, and we are really excited to be here for our second summer. We work with teenage volunteers, so middle schoolers, high schoolers, and adults to complete home repair projects across the community. It's pretty surprising to see a middle schooler with a power tool, but we teach them how to do it safely, and the results are pretty magnificent. Angelina and Joseph are part of an 8-person summer staff that we hire to run our programs. So there will be 6 more people joining them who we pay to kind of live and work here for the summer, directing the work of the volunteers. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Angelina.
So with the 354 volunteers that we had last year, we were able to complete 22 projects for 16 homeowners. And that included 1 wheelchair ramp, 7 fence replacements, 8 painting projects, including the senior center right across the street. That was an SSP project, and 2 shade structures and 4 other projects. So community partners that we have here in Imperial Beach are Imperial Beach Neighborhood Center, City of Imperial Beach, Tijuana River National Estuarine, and Research Reserve, and Wild Coast. So the last 3 are great environmental service opportunities that our volunteers get to partake in. Sorry. And now I'm going to hand it over to Joseph Makunga.
So you'll see in the next couple of slides a little bit of a review of our first year in Imperial Beach. Those were in the first picture. You'll see that the summer staff and the executive director with a local from the Boys and Girls Club. We've done a lot of different activities around the community. This is a work team outside the Seacoast Hotel that's right out on Seacoast Drive, where we built some awnings, and we have every Wednesdays we do our dinner and program out on the beach. So there's a little picture of that. We did lots of painting projects. This is actually taken from a house over on 7th Street, where a group spent the entirety of the summer last year. And here's a picture of the wheelchair ramp that we completed also over the summer, before and after. And some of the opportunities, as we've mentioned in the past, that the youth and volunteers who come to IB get to partake in is working with Wild Coast and with the estuary and the research center, doing some invasive species removal. With Wild Coast, they do a lot of data collection where they pick up a trash on the beach and they input what kind of data or what kind of trash it is, so that Wild Coast can kind of update their database with that. And our Wednesday service also incorporates aspects of training with the Mexican or Mexican neighbors, and some of our staff and volunteers actually go. We split up like in about roughly half, and half of them will work in a community garden on right on the border wall, and the other half will work in the U.S. side, and they actually meet up around lunch at Friendship Park on Wednesdays, which is really neat that the Border Patrol has given us that opportunity for the past 3 years to kind of have that space in Friendship Park when it's normally closed. And yeah, I'm gonna pass it back to Meg.
So this work is organized by our staff, but also through community partnerships. And I really want to highlight the work that all of you people up here have done for us, and also Pastor John and Josie. It's definitely a community effort in terms of being able to house and feed and shower these volunteers. So the next step is how folks can get involved. So we will be at the farmers market passing out work request forms to the community next on the 15th, 2 Fridays from now. We're also hosting a community dinner on the 16th of March, and everyone's invited. So we're going to have 30 volunteers coming in from the LA region, and it's a fun time to eat and talk with teenagers and get to know one another. During the summer, we've got lots of other opportunities. We have typical Tuesday night community dinners, which I know many of you have been a part of in the past, and great time, free food, awesome company. And then Wednesday, new this year, we're inviting teams of local youth to come out and volunteer with us for a day. And that's a free opportunity for young people to come get a taste of what it's like to work on a home repair project. We provide everything. They just need to let us know in advance. Also on Saturday, we're organizing some support crews to help out our staff, and just working in the kitchen, helping them kind of gear up for the next week of volunteers, lots of pizza. And also working in our tool trailer, just preparing for the next group of people. So if anyone has any skills or wants to get involved, these are some great ways to come do that. So these are our work request forms. We pass them out here. We've got a bunch of copies. They're at City Hall and farmers markets all over. Also have a digital version as well. So please share them with people that you think could benefit from our services. And you can reach us at email, phone, whatever. You can find us on the web. So thank you for your time and for your support. We're really grateful to be here, and it's my first time speaking at a city council, so thank you for that.
We did a great job. Since it's a public comment period and it's not an agendized item, we can't really have a discussion about it, but thank you so much. Appreciate it. Now we have Dante Pimentuan.
Hi, good evening. Just wanted to say, I wanted to thank everyone who supported the efforts to remove the language and terminology of managed retreat and eminent domain from our local Imperial Beach local plan and general plan. There's still a lot of work to do. The residents are really looking at general plan in detail under a microscope, so I know we have till July. So I do appreciate all the residents that united and gave support for helping to remove that language. So with that, the California Coastal Commission, Mayor Serge Dedina, and the new council member, Paloma Aguirre, didn't expect the pushback from local citizens. There's more coming, so we're going to be prepared. So stay united, everybody, here in Imperial Beach. There is a link to an HBO episode called HBO Vice News Tonight on the King Tides. So wanted to let everybody know. The King Tides are coming next month again. So I wanted to ask city manager, doing a great job with preparation for our rains and our King Tide, but I'd like to make sure that we're more prepared for this King Tide coming up, that it's not a show, and that there's no people like the mayor and the council member grandstanding out there and setting it up. So just wanted to let you guys know that we're watching, and we appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you.
Dan Percival.
Dan Percival, 129 date, IB. I recently found out you guys are volunteers, so that changes my look, and if you've been getting a bad attitude from me, I'm sorry. Listen to what your staff's been doing. You told me I could file a complaint, yeah? Anytime with the city. Madam Attorney? I've tried to file 13 complaints about your staff and haven't been able to get but one of them through. Sam told me I need to find other sidewalks to walk on. Won't take a complaint. That's the only complaint I got through. Sandra refuses to take complaints. I've come down every 2 weeks until February 22nd. I guess now I'm banned from City Hall because the staff doesn't like me. I came down every 2 weeks to ask any or all of you to meet with me, to help me out, because I'm getting nowhere. It's been 9 months and 4 days. I got 3 more months to decide if I want to sue the city, or are you going to help me? He knows there's an illegal sidewalk down there. The people that designed it know there's an illegal sidewalk down there, and you won't do anything about it. You won't even make the Marriott keep their cars off of it. They park at will. There's no will in your staff to get it stopped. 34% of your population is disabled and senior. Thank you.
Thank you. Leon Benham. Mr. Benham.
I have a handout. Is that permissible to give it out? Okay. I mean,
Thank you.
so real quickly, I know that we've been working on the local coastal plan, and many citizens have come out to protest the that type of aggressive land acquisition, but I wanted to put the point on in the sand supply from the Tijuana River Valley. Historically, the San Diego or the Tijuana River gives us 650,000 cubic yards per year. These are tests done in the 40s, 50s, and 70s. Right now, there's a consideration of a sand capture basin. And if you read what I put on on this letter, you know, the recent heavy rains, they've really shown that there's two contrasting systems of sand transportation. If you choose to be objective and look, the first one is the man-made system that is at Goat Canyon. The next one is at Smuggler's Gulch. It's estimated that in the last 12 weeks that almost 52,000 yards of clean white beach sand has transported down Smuggler's Gulch. It has a flow of about 75,000 CFM, whereas Goat Canyon takes about 40,000 CFM. So Goat Canyon, look to spend $1.8 million every year for the rest of time to do that. And you're looking at putting in a new sand capture basin at the main channel at the IBWC property. So if you look at the cost of that over 30 years, you could almost pay handsomely to restore and replace all of Tijuana sewage system. we have to look at these Band-Aids and look at the long-term final solution for the Tijuana River. To put up a sand capture basin is financially out of the question. If you spend 10 to 20 million a year to maintain it over 30 years, if you look at that type of investment, and it won't end at 30, it'll go on. But if we get our resources of state, federal, local resources to fix the Tijuana River Valley with a natural cobblestone creek is really the best solution. It supplies cobblestones and sand to our beaches. It protects our coastal homes. So you can read this. I hope it goes into the record, and I appreciate your time.
Second.
Motion carried unanimously.
Sorry. Whereas in 2016, the U.S. Senate declared March 6, 2016, the first annual World Lymphedema Day. And whereas lymphedema is a debilitating disease that results in accumulation of lymph fluid in the limbs where the lymphatic system is damaged. This disease affects up to 10 million Americans and 250 million people worldwide. Whereas lymphedema can be hereditary or acquired as a result of cancer treatment or physical trauma. Up to 30% of cancer survivors will get this disease. And whereas currently there is no cure for lymphedema, the effects are lifelong, drastically affect quality of life, and can lead to shortened lifespan. And whereas the Lymphatic Education and Research Network is an international organization that fights lymphedema and lymphatic diseases through education, research, and advocacy. They hope to bring attention to lymphedema and lymphatic diseases in hopes that new treatments are discovered and that one day there will be a cure. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Sarah Stadina, Mayor of the City of Imperial Beach, together with the City Council, do hereby recognize March 6, 2019 as World Lymphedema Day. And we have Barbara Harmer is here to accept that. And just also wanted to thank Susan Arciago, who really made that happen as well behind the scenes. And she wasn't here this evening, but yeah, we really appreciate it. Please tell her that we thank her as well. Thank you. And now we have a great one. Presentation of proclamation to Kenneth Caldwell and recognition over 40 years of business in Imperial Beach. And I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the presentation of proclamation to Kenneth D. Caldwell.
So moved. Second.
Is there a vote? And Mr. Patton is going to issue the proclamation. Mr. Caldwell, if you'd like to come up.
Motion carried unanimously.
I don't know if we want to hear them all.
So in recognition, over 40 years of business, Kenneth Caldwell served in the Navy for 20 years as Senior Chief Petty Officer. And in those years, it brought him all over the world, including Japan, where he met his wife, Toshi, who I adored. And he had two sons, Stephen and Kevin. Are they here? Kenneth's been a member of the Imperial Beach business and real estate community for over 40 years and has built one of the largest and longest standing businesses in Imperial Beach. Kenneth has built his brokerage, Coel Realty, on Palm Avenue, based on integrity, competence, hard work, great dedication to his clients for whom he has routinely served beyond the call of duty. And the last one, whereas Kenneth Coel has been known to treat all his tenants and all those who walk through his doors with utmost fairness and courtesy. And my story, I have to say, and this is why I wanted to do this, back in 97, or even before that, I used to rent from Kent in a place. It was $575 a month, 2 bedrooms across the street from the beach. He never raised my rent. He knew I was going to college. You know, it didn't take me 7 years, but, the time came where a house came up right around the corner, and Ken completely could have bought it. I mean, no doubt he could have bought it, but he allowed me to buy it. And so, do you remember that?
I'm sorry. I don't buy everything in town.
I'm crushed. Okay, but anyway, but I think for that I remember, and dearly, because I still pinch myself going, I can't believe I own a house. So let it be known that today, resolved that today I, Robert Patton, along with the mayor and the rest of the city council, do hereby proclaim March 6th, 2019, Kenneth D. Coel Day in Imperial Beach. Thank you very much. You want to get a picture? Oh, we'll do that after.
Thanks for coming in, guys. And now we have consent calendar items 2.1 and 2.9. Just please note the last minute agenda information was submitted on consent calendar item number 2.1, revision to page 4 of the December 5, 2018 minutes. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve consent calendar items 2.1 through 2.9.
Mr. Mayor, please, I'd like to pull one item with the agreement of the council. Normally, we ask sometimes for agenda changes in the beginning of the meeting. We didn't do that this time, so I had to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I'd like to pull item 2.6, which has to do with a significant contract award that's on consent that we probably ought to add a couple questions about it. I think they're fairly routine. I mentioned them already to the city manager and a couple comments on that item. 2.6. Yeah, I'd like to move that we pull 2.6, put it at the end of the agenda, and it shouldn't take too long to get through that item. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Please vote.
Motion
Great.
carried by the motion failed.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve consent. I guess there's still a motion on the floor. Is that right? Do I have to reissue that?
It wasn't seconded.
Wait.
We don't think we have to vote.
We just vote. So now we're voting on the full consent calendar item. Is that right?
Did we have?
Oh, please vote. Okay. Great. Now we have item.
Sorry, Councilmember Spriggs, please vote.
I must say it's extraordinary that we don't honor the request of one of our members to pull an item for discussion. This is the first time I've heard of this, and I don't really understand it.
Motion carried by the following vote: ayes, Dedina, Patton, Aguirre, West, noes, Spriggs.
I mean, can we have a discussion about this? This is extraordinary. I've never heard of this before on our council, at least in the 8 years I've been on the council.
We have item 5.1, presentation on the Imperial Beach Opportunistic Beach Restoration Program. Environmental and Natural Resources Director Helmer will give a
Mr. Mayor, we're
presentation.
setting a bad precedent here, and I think we should have a discussion. This is on the agenda.
We've now moved on, sorry.
Exactly, and this is a $240,000 item.
You're out of order, Mr. Spriggs.
I'm not out of order. I'm
You're out of
simply
order.
talking about an item.
We've now moved on. The item's been voted on. You're now out of order. It's not, you're voting out of turn on the non-agenda item.
You are really setting a bad precedent here, Mr. Mayor. But unity, collaboration, is very bad.
Mr. Helmer will
right.
give the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, it's just an educational item that we're bringing forward. We have Leslie Meyerhoff here, and we also have Chris Scott, who is a coastal engineer here. They're helping the city with the not so intuitive process of getting permits in line in order to do beach nourishment project. So we definitely need the help of and expertise of Leslie here. So Leslie has a very informative presentation. And we have a coastal engineer to answer any questions that you may have related to this. So Leslie, please take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to speak with you about your SCOOP program. Let's start with the basics. What is SCOOP? SCOOP is the acronym for Sand Compatibility and Opportunistic Use Program. And the goals and objectives of the SCOOP program are to allow you to take advantage of opportunistically available sources of beach quality sediment, such as those generated by the Hotel Del and other development and dredging projects. What we do as part of the SCOOP program is to develop a plan that will enable you to have permits in place that are valid for a period of 5 years, so that when material comes available, you're in position to receive that sand and place it on the beach. SCOOP was first started in San Diego County in 2008, initially by SandAg, and there were 5 participating cities, including Imperial Beach, also the city of Coronado, Encinitas, Solana Beach, and Oceanside were all participants in the original SCOOP program. The original program in Imperial Beach had an environmental document that was certified in 2008. After that was certified, the permitting process began, and that was concluded in approximately 2010. And then the city had permits in place through 2013, 2015. Each of the permits had a different expiration date. So in the original SCOOP program, there was one receiver site in South Imperial Beach, basically the area shown here in the red box, and that is Seacoast Drive south of Imperial Beach Boulevard. Sand was placed there also in RBSP 1, Regional Beach Sand 1. So under the original SCOOP program, there were 3 placement options, including a beach berm, which is basically sand on the beach, a surf zone placement, which is sand within the active area that's worked by waves, and then a third option, what we call the nearshore option, which is a little bit further offshore. With the original SCOOP program, the maximum cubic yards that could be placed was 75,000 cubic yards, or 25,000 cubic yards per project. As part of the renewal, we've retained the bulk of the original elements of the program, including the South Imperial Beach receiver site. And we've also added a second site that encompasses the entire city shoreline. And the idea behind this larger footprint is to allow the city to begin pursuing development of a beach sand dune system or living shoreline system. So again, we're sticking with the original 75,000 cubic yard per year maximum limit. And then there's 2 different time frames in which beach sand can be placed. There's a low beach season, which is fall and winter, and a higher beach use season, which would be the spring and summer seasons. The seasons are defined generally as September 15th through 28th is the low season, And March 1st through September 14th is considered the high beach use season. And ideally, you place sand during the fall and winter because you can go with a more wide variety of sand types with higher fines contents. And I'll get into that a little bit further in a moment. So with the beach berm option, we've got a cross section here that kind of shows what it looks like from a side view. This is the footprint similar to Regional Beach Sand 1 and 2 projects, with the volume capped at 75,000 cubic yards. These dimensions are approximate. They're simply a template, a template in which sand can be placed. So the maximum width would be 120 feet, and that includes the footprint and the slope towards the sea. Under the beach berm placement option, the maximum elevation is plus 10 feet above mean low water, and an offshore slope has a face of 10:1. The second option is the surf zone placement, and this option was utilized in the Tijuana Estuary Sediment Fate and Transport Study that the city participated in 2009. Again, there's a 75,000 cubic yard limit for that placement, and it's placed directly in the surf zone as opposed to on the dry beach. The height with this placement option is 2 to 3 feet, and it's placed at approximately plus 2 feet relative to mean low or low water. The third option is the near shore, and this placement option was utilized in 2011 as part of the Ballast Point Maintenance Dredging Project. Same limit of 75,000 cubic yards, but here, as you can see in the cross section, the material is actually placed offshore in a mound formation. So the height of that kind of a placement varies considerably, and in general, the depth is anywhere from -10 to -25 feet relative to mean low or low water. So what's new for the current SCOOP permitting process that we're undertaking is this concept of a dune or living shoreline project. And this is intended to replicate the historic dunes that have existed along the coastline here, and those that are still, fairly robust to the north of us along Silver Strand, and also in Coronado. The template that we have used for permitting purposes is based on the Cardiff Living Shoreline Reef, which is under construction, and maybe some of you are familiar with that project. With this alternative, it's similar to the beach berm placement, but it's placed more towards the back of the beach, above the mean high water line. With this option, the dune height would be ranging from 2 to 7 feet above mean high water. And this is a conceptual design for now. We do anticipate as part of the permitting process that we will be doing additional engineering and environmental review. There are a multitude of environmental permits that are required for beach sand placement, as you're probably aware. We have already submitted applications to the regional board, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the San Diego Port District. Each of those permits was submitted last fall, and each of the permits also has a different permitting track. We are actively working with each of those agencies to be responsive to any data requests that they are making of the city, to make sure that we are facilitating the permit issuance as quickly as we can. Right now, we're estimating probably June timeframe, summer or fall, for issuance of all the permits. Just a note about Coastal Commission permitting, because of the sort of unique jurisdictional boundaries in Imperial Beach with the Coastal Commission and the Port of San Diego, there is no coastal development permit that is issued for beach sand placement for a SCOOP project. That is deferred to Port of San Diego for the most part, provided that the project is consistent with your local coastal program. And as I noted here, that we will probably be looking at additional engineering and environmental review for the Living Shoreline project. I just wanted to note here that your 2019 draft general plan and local coastal program in the safety element, which is Chapter 7, has a couple of policies dedicated to resiliency building along your coastline, also promoting recreation and shoreline protection benefits. Policy 7.1.5 is to pursue the reestablishment of a SCOOP program. So we are consistent with that policy. And then policy 7.1.15 is to begin pursuing a living shoreline development concept. So we're also consistent with that policy goal. And once you have your permits in place, there are a number of essential steps to actually implementing a SCOOP project. The first item that you want to implement is to identify projects that are going to be generating export or involve dredging or otherwise create sediment that's going to be compatible for the beach. As soon as you've identified those sources, then you can submit a letter of interest or otherwise begin a negotiation process with an applicant or developer to let them know you're interested and that you have the permits in place and would like to begin exploring how to make that sand get to the beach. You can also consider cost sharing with the applicant or developer, because there are a number of costs associated with this type of a program. Even though the sand per se is not doesn't have a per cubic yard cost, the other costs associated with SCOOP implementation do have a price tag associated with them. After you've initiated communications with an applicant or developer, then you have to develop what's called a sampling and analysis plan. And that is basically the plan to evaluate the material that's on site, both in terms of grain size and chemistry, to make sure it's compatible with your native beach material. That process requires 2 to 3 months coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers, the Regional Board, and EPA, and they essentially have to buy off on your sampling plan before you can conduct the actual sampling. Once that process is complete and you've got your sampling, and assuming it is compatible with the beach, then you prepare a project notification report. Again, this requires coordination with Regional Board and EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers. They would then review your plan to place the material, the timing, the volume, and other details specific to that project. The next step is to then begin to conduct pre-construction monitoring and begin placement activities of the material. And some of the things that you're required to monitor before you can place sand are the beach profiles, to look at the beach before you begin to place the sand to make sure you're not placing sand in an area that already has plenty of sand. We also do qualitative surfing profile monitoring. We collect data for water quality and turbidity measurements. We evaluate the presence of nearshore resources, as well as potential effects on shorebirds and grunion. And then as part of the actual construction project and beach placement, we conduct debris management efforts and take photographs of each load as it leaves the construction site and as it's placed on the beach to make sure there's nothing unwanted in the beach sand. So once you've implemented your actual SCOOP project, the wrap-up is post-construction monitoring and a summary report that is submitted to the agencies at the conclusion of your SCOOP project. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I've also got my engineer here tonight who's available to answer any technical questions you might have. Thank you very much.
I have a question or request. Could you elaborate a little bit more on grain size and chemistry compatibility for beach nourishment projects?
Yes, in general, the grain size is you're trying to match up what's already on your beach. So there's a certain threshold that you're looking for, a certain range of gradation, and anything lower than, I think it's a 0.5, correct me if I'm wrong, 0.50 millimeter cannot be placed on the sand. And then there's finer grain materials that can create a lot of turbidity, and because they stay suspended in the water. And so we really shy away from using those. And at certain levels, you can't use at all. They're just simply not considered beach compatible.
Such as silt or contaminated silt, such as the silt and sediment found in Borderfield State Park sediment basins, correct?
Yes, sometimes. And that's where the sampling comes into play. And that's a critical component of making sure that the material that is available to you is what you want to be placing on your beach. So chemistry comes into effect. Usually, if you're looking at a developed site, the first couple feet are not going to be eligible to be placed on the beach because they're going to be contaminated.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for the presentation. Just a couple questions. You talked about finding a source of sand. How do you go about finding a source?
Well, what we've done in other cities is as development applications are submitted to the city and let's say an applicant is planning to excavate for a basement or otherwise create a volume of material to be exported off-site, usually about 5,000 to 10,000 cubic yards is sort of a minimum that you'd want to look at for viability because of the other costs associated with that. So within your city, you can have your planning staff who's receiving the applications screen them for export volumes. You can also track what other projects are going on in San Diego, for example, or points north and points east, because most cities don't have a SCOOP program. So the fact that you're moving forward with re-permitting your SCOOP program is going to put you in a pretty good position.
Yeah, I think getting those permits done ahead of time is key.
Agree.
To jump on that. And then the Dune project, that's kind of intriguing to me. And I know Cardiff Reef and Cardiff, that beach is completely different than our beach. We have a giant reef. I think it's tamer than Imperial Beach. Maybe I'm just being biased, but our beach, the beach break, pure sand, maybe with some cobblestones. Have you looked at the difference and like how the Dune project would even last compared to a Cardiff Reef is somewhat protected area,
I think that there's additional engineering and environmental review that will be required in order to implement something like that. So what we're doing now is just kind of getting the process started and getting the agencies informed that that's something that the city is interested in pursuing.
Okay, thank you. I'm not an expert at this, but I'm certainly intrigued, so thank you.
I'd like to just follow up on that. When we were preparing our 2015-2016 sea level rise risk assessment adaptation strategy, one of the 5 adaptation strategies that we talked about, and one that I actually had to fight to get it in there, at least initially, was cobble dune approach as one of the adaptation strategies. And it's expensive because the approach that we took, and you've probably read this as well, and thank you for this presentation, is one of the aspects of it is that it also requires regular sand replenishment in order to protect the dunes and give them an opportunity to grow the vegetation, etc., before they're inundated with wave action. So it's quite an extensive approach, but it offers a longer term solution for Imperial Beach and a natural shoreline approach. So obviously engineering, the studies you mentioned, engineering and environmental, are going to be needed. You mentioned them almost as though they're part of the SCOOP program in order to suggest this new approach. Is that the case? And to what extent will we actually get some environmental and engineering analysis as part of this, or was that a later phase?
It will most likely be a later phase. We did submit a request for inclusion of the larger footprint encompassing the entire city shoreline for back beach placement and creation of the berm. We didn't specify whether it was going to be cobble or something larger than cobble, like the Cardiff project, where they're utilizing what rock is already there. They're restacking it to stabilize the back beach and protect Highway 101 in that location. We've been working with city staff here to try and develop some concepts using Cardiff, just because it is so contemporary, and the agencies, at least in the San Diego region, are very familiar with that. There's a lot of momentum, I would say, in Southern California in general, and with state agencies like Coastal Commission, Coastal Conservancy, and other entities to fund these types of projects, because they are considered, resiliency building measures and soft solutions, and can provide a variety of benefits, including, recreation, habitat, and shoreline protection.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that presentation. Just a background. So, our natural sand supply obviously was cut off probably, 50 or 60 years, if not more, years ago, decades ago, by the imposition of development of dams on the U.S. side of the border in the Tijuana River watershed and Rodriguez Dam, as well as the channelization of the Tijuana River in 1973. So that has significant impact on reducing our sand flow. And just make sure I'm correct, Mr. Helmer. First, Goat Canyon isn't managed by the city of Imperial Beach. We have no jurisdiction or control. We don't spend any money on that. That's primarily that is a project of the state of California State Parks. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But when that sedimentation basin to capture sediment was overwhelmed with sediment, it was the idea of the state of California, I think the federal government, to actually determine whether or not that sediment was suitable for placement on the beach. Is that correct?
That is correct, and the estuary is still looking into it. So to one degree, what we're proposing in the SCOOP permit is to extend the footprint for a potential living shoreline project to our entire city limit, which includes the Mexican border. Talk about the engineering plans, what would a dune project take? Well, it's conceivable that California State Parks would take that step to do that additional engineering and analysis and testing the sediment to even determine if it's suitable for beach placement.
But it was my understanding it was that they determined it didn't meet. Is it a 50% threshold, right, between sediment? But it didn't meet the threshold for beach sand. Is that correct?
It's very silty material. So until they have a cheap storage spot to put that silty material, which all the agencies are looking at with the Nelson Sloan Quarry project, it is conceivable that when you have to filter out the trash and separate out the cobbles and the grain size analysis, when they clean out the sediment basin every year, they could sort out the good sand versus the silty sand, the clean sand versus the dirty sand. And it is possible that that sand may be a potential resource here in the future. And I know a lot of state agencies are looking at that.
But the other thing they found out, it was fairly toxic. They found it was a pretty dirty material. Is that correct?
They haven't done a complete analysis yet of it to determine that.
Good. Okay. So, I think, our experience since 2004 with the offshore projects, in theory, they made the surf really good. I didn't really see, I think we had 2 or 3 of them. We never saw the analysis whether they made the beach a lot bigger. They made the surf a lot better, but the first round that was dredged from San Diego Bay was a disaster. I'm not sure anybody was really happy with the second round that was dredged from the Coast Guard station. That's not necessarily the place that we want to get our sand from. But I think definitely the consensus of stakeholders, and we recently met with a lot of beach stakeholders, is that they'd love to see more offshore projects. I think the consensus is those are the least disruptive, more recreational, benefiting projects. And I think overall, a lot of coastal engineers will tell you that, at some point the sand's going to wash back to shore. So I think that's the consensus that we'd like to see. It's just the least disruptive, potentially has the most benefit for all the different recreational beach users. I think, like Mr. Patton, I definitely want to see. I think we need to go through one cycle of Cardiff to actually see that. I guess for the living shoreline, I was just really overwhelmed. Apparently, by standing on the beach during king tide flooding, observing king tides, about the impact of king tides on the existing living shoreline or berm at the south end, south of Seacoast Drive, where the estuary. That was a multi-million-dollar berm, and that storm eviscerated it. It was really interesting. That's why that water started pouring through. So, obviously, living shorelines aren't seawalls and they're not rocks, but it'd be good. I think the idea of a pilot project, and at the same time, I think we should look at a pilot project. But definitely, we don't want to just invest all our resources in living shoreline until we see the viability of that. But I think definitely, if there's opportunistic sand that we can dump offshore in a strategic location, I think the consensus by everybody, as long as we're clear that it's clean. I think that's a big issue, is making sure. We've had lots of problems with it, and then we had a number of boats that just showed up without letting anybody know, and so we had no idea where the sand was from. Literally, where our lifeguards had to call like the Coast Guard and find out, why is this ship offshore dumping sand on our beach? So I think that was unfortunate, because it just interfered with this sort of viability of these projects, or the public perception of these projects. So. But I think overall, the feedback and consensus is pretty positive on offshore dumping. As long as we're clear and we can give their certificate with like a seal on it that shows that, we did the studies, the research that said it was clean.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just the fundamental component of the program is
Right.
getting the agencies to concur that the material is compatible for the beach. I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't meet that test, you simply don't move forward. And the permitting approach we're taking with the 3 placement options from the original SCOOP program plus the additional living shoreline dune concept, I think gives the city the kind of maximum flexibility to place different types of sand in different locations, depending on the needs of the city.
And, just to comment, I think this council, at least, and most of us and most folks in the stakeholder committee would absolutely be in favor of the restoration of the Tijuana River Valley and, re-engineering that valley. Unfortunately, that's nothing to do with the city of Imperial Beach. In fact, we've been pressuring the Fish and Wildlife Service just to eliminate some of that sediment and sand that's blocking the Tijuana river mouth, as you know. So I think we'd love to see that sand back on the beach. Unfortunately, it's filling in the estuary and then reducing, the flood control viability of the Tijuana estuary. Congressman Vargas passed a bill that would allow the Army Corps of Engineers to have more say in this. But, from listening to Councilmember Aguirre's discussion of her trip, it sounds like there's not a lot of money for that. But I absolutely would be in favor of Congress allocating money to significantly redo the Tijuana River Valley to enhance the water flow and make it more viable for getting sand back on the beach. I think that's a great idea. So, but just to make sure we're all clear, the city of Imperial Beach has absolutely no control over that in terms of funding and jurisdiction. We're not the agency to do that. And it is a very complicated process with its EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the Regional Water Board. It's not an easy project. Apparently, Coronado is just throwing sand away because they don't even want to deal with it. Is that correct?
Well,
yeah, which is shocking to me. It's awful that we're dumping sand in a landfill rather than actually put it up on our beach.
Yeah, they don't have a SCOOP program in place anymore either. So they're, I think, sort of in the same boat as you.
Right. Okay. Anyway.
Did this project in any way get through the process in time to take advantage of some of that?
Right.
I assume good sand that Coronado's not using.
Yeah, I think potentially the second phase of their master plan build out project, they would, I think that's like the end of this year, early next year. We are definitely trying to expedite these permits to get them in place so that you could take advantage of that.
I mean, I think as part of the overall discussion on state regulatory framework, we've got to figure out a way to get this sand on beaches quicker. I mean, the fact that with issues of sea level rise and coastal flooding and just overall erosion rates, we're dumping sand in a landfill rather than putting it on a beach.
Right.
That's good sand is completely crazy. So, right. Yeah. Anyway, so I guess that was it. You just needed feedback. Is that correct? Good. Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And now we have item 5.2, consideration of resolution number 2019-8022, authorizing a payment of $5.3 million to the California Public Utilities Retirement System to reduce the unfunded accrued liability of the city of Imperial Beach. Deputy City Manager Cortez will give the report.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Some of this information may be redundant to you because we presented this item at the retreat last week. So this is the authorization to make a prepayment to CalPERS on our unfunded liability. As previously mentioned, CalPERS, we make 2 payments. We have a normal cost, which is basically our current employees, unfunded liability, past, current, and future. These are the normal costs per tiers that we have on our public safety, fire, and miscellaneous employees. And we've addressed some of these with some cost sharing during negotiations. What happened to the unfunded liability? First, let me mention 2 things. It's important to note that this is not an increase. This presentation or sending additional payments to CalPERS is not increasing any pension benefits or restructuring the benefits. But basically addressing current and future liability costs to the city, which could potentially double if we don't address it. The other thing that I mentioned that I realized it's not on my presentation, previously mentioned it to the council, but it's important for the public to know, these $5.3 million are not hitting our general fund. The city, I lost the word. Thank you. was going to say allocated. The city relinquished a road, Caltrans Highway 75, and they made an assessment that would be the equivalent. So it's additional cash flow and an opportunity to address this. With that said, again, the unfunded liability is on top of what we already contribute to our normal costs. What is the issue? As many of you know, and through conferences and some other jurisdictions and colleagues, basically CalPERS reduced their discount rate from 7.5 to 7. There are some discussions that it can continue to reduce, but there's obviously nothing confirmed, which created a deficit, obviously, and a problem for all the entities, including the city of Imperial Beach. Just as a highlight, these are costs for the unfunded liability, miscellaneous, and safety fire being one of the highest for a total of $12.6 million currently. Again, if that number can fluctuate year by year, meaning it can increase. So the city of Imperial Beach did a whole bunch of analysis together with the city manager. What would be the best way to leverage those $5.3 million? So we have a total of 84 bases. So 84, the best way to put it into perspective is 84 mortgage payments. You have amortization schedules. And we literally went through a bunch of scenarios together to make sure that, 84, to which one will leverage more, which one will gain more of the savings at the same time, reduce some of the cost, future costs. And so the first one is the one that we are actually proposing, because the savings is larger than the second one, the second box. As you can see, it's 6.9 versus 6.3. That's the future savings. And the reduction of the payments is a little bit less, but again, we have a higher savings. And literally the intent is that that savings will increase as we go, right? As we continue to make additional payments as we go. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight here, and I'll blow it up for you. So these are the bases, the 3 bases that we feel like it's the best, to leverage the money. What I wanted to highlight, it says 5.3. I know the resolution says 5.1. The resolution says 5.3, which is the recommendation. This would be the upfront payment that we do. The delta, we will make an additional payment in our next fiscal year. So every July 1st, we have a scheduled payment. So in essence, we'll apply that as an additional payment, the delta between the 5.1 and the 5.3. Again, I'm highlighting the savings there. So CalPERS has the option of a 30-year or a 20-year amortization. The 30-year, basically you lower your payments, but it stretches it. You pay more interest. The 20-year, you increase your payment, but you have a little bit of savings. Again, same aspect of having a mortgage. So with that said, after the analysis, with the thorough analysis, we think that it's best that we maintain the 30-year amortization, and that is in the event that the city in the future has any financial constraints, that we're not constrained to make that big payment in a 20-year. But the intent would be to make that annual payment that we normally are scheduled to do in addition to additional payments. That way we can attain that savings that you would normally get in a 20-year amortization schedule. With that said, staff is recommending adopting Resolution 2019-8022, which would authorize a payment to CalPERS for $5.3 million applied to our funded liability. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions for me.
Actually, we had some numbers that you guys provided at the workshop last week. Do you have those so we can show those to the council and the public? I think those are a little bit more helpful.
We put number the study.
The savings, yeah, well, I'll show the total cost.
Yeah, we can put, I think we have them right here.
Yeah, so why don't we, Mr. Hall, you want to walk through those?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if we just went with the 30-year amortization that CalPERS has for us now, essentially we have a principal of 12.5 million. If you amortize that over 30 years at the 7% discount rate, and that's what CalPERS will charge us is their discount rate, we would pay 17 million in interest for a total of 30 million. Now, if we did nothing else but reduce that down to a 20-year amortization, then you could see there that we'd only pay $10 million and, well, I guess $11 million in interest, and that would reduce that total payment for the unfunded liability down to 23 million. But if we can prepay, and that's what we're suggesting tonight, if we can prepay and again make those additional payments to lower that amortization and keep it in that 20-year time frame, then we'll not only get the $7 million savings that you see from the prepayment, but we will also get about a $5 million addition by paying it off. It's just like your mortgage at home. If you can pay a 30-year mortgage off in 20 years, you're going to save significant amounts of interest. And that's where you add the 7, you save another 5, and you end up with about a $12 million savings. So it's significant what we're doing. And I got to commend the council. Again, it would have been really easy to take this, and this is what cities would normally do, take $5.3 million and put it in our Chandler asset and get really excited if we get up to 1.5%, and be really excited about that. But the city council told us from the very beginning, take this and make sure you leverage this to make sure that the city gets the most benefit from this. And I think we've turned that $5.3 million into about 12 or a little over 12. And that's pretty exciting stuff. So thanks for allowing us to do that.
Good. Mr. West, thank you for that. And thank you for the presentation.
Deputy City Manager Cortez, great presentation. City Manager Hall, I'm very happy with the work you guys put into this. I know that I came in here one day and saw you guys with the look of numbers blowing your mind on your faces, but you guys really put in some time on this. And I think it's really important for the public to understand that, cities all over America are dealing with this in a way that they are, I think the mayor said it, the city of Chicago has got a $1 billion deficit right now dealing with their pensions. And they're just not, that's not the only city, it's all over. And I think there are cities in our county that are struggling with even they're looking at going bankrupt within 3 to 5 years because of CalPERS. And it's happening in our community. So for a little city like this to have this opportunity and step up to it, your recommendations, City Manager Hall, was really what spurned this, and I think that I'm very happy. The one thing your recommendation is to go to the 30-year, and I think that when every homeowner buys their home, they all have grand ideas of, oh, I'm just going to make an extra payment and pay it off in 20 years. Well, that doesn't happen very often. Most people do not do that. Most people sit back and just make their payments, and guess what? There we are 30 years later. So. And you're going to see all of us are going to be long gone in a few years, and you may have a different council that may not be able to do that. So you'd end up with the 30-year. So is that really the recommendation that we should be going with, is that 30-year versus 20-year? Because that creates a lot of, I am all for saving the money. Don't get me wrong. I am saving $6 million is great. But I'm concerned with the recommendation. I think I'd almost rather go with the 20-year recommendation vice the 30-year recommendation because of the unknowns of people being willing to pay off, and that money's sitting in the bank, and somebody's going to want to spend it on a park or a project. That's my concern.
Yeah, we talked a lot about this. Again, I think the city's in a position that we could do that today, at least. I think what we wanted to do was, and I agree, it would take a lot of discipline. Mm-hmm. It would take a lot of discipline for us to make sure that we're making those additional payments so that we can save that additional $5 million.
Yeah.
Make sure that we're staying on schedule to pay this off in 20 years instead of 30 years. Again, just probably being overly conservative, just wanted to make sure that if the city ever did find itself in a 2007, 2008 again, that we might be able to miss a year or miss 2 years or whatever. And then, perhaps we would even have a catch up where we would pay a large sum to catch back up and try to reduce that amortization to 20 years. It's significant. I agree with you. With the 30-year amortization, and even with this, we're only going to save 7 million. If we can reduce that to 20-year amortization, we're going to save 12 million. That's a huge. I mean, what we're doing tonight, I think, really solidifies the financial stability of this community, and that would do it that much more. There's no doubt about that. So, just point well taken. That's the concern, right? That's the concern.
That a little bit more. I know we didn't get a chance to look at those numbers that in that much detail at the retreat, but what would the additional payment over and above what we normally pay out of our general fund budget be if we went to a 20-year amortization with the, and what would be the impact of that addition?
You know, that's a good point. It's not significant. It's somewhere around $200,000 a year. So which is essentially what our savings is. And so what we were planning to do is take a portion of that savings and make the additional payment, and then just continue to budget the higher amount that we had always anticipated budgeting. Because remember, our unfunded liability payments were going to increase from about what they are now, about 804,000, I think, this year, to in 2033 they were going to be up to 1.6 million.
Yeah.
So this would have stabilized that a lot, and so hopefully we can save some of that money and make those additional payments. Now again, I'll be honest, if it's the preference of the city council to lock in the 20-year amortization, we'll do that. We were just, again, trying to make sure that we were being as prudent as we can, but also building in that flexibility and that safety just in case we hit another 2007, 2008. We know eventually those things happen. So we wanted to maintain that flexibility for those down years. That's the only purpose for it. There's no need for it right now. It's the future.
I mean, the reality is we're going to see another 2007 to 2008 during the time, probably within these time frame. And I
Oh, not.
Well,
it's the second worst economic disaster in the history of the United States. So
well, I mean, seriously, it's a 7-year cycle that we go on that see a pretty significant drawdown. So I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. So I do not feel very comfortable with not. I'd rather lock it in a 20-year, because I think that people just do not have the discipline to make that.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think the 20-year saves the community the most, about 12 million, as shown here, and that's a really good use of this money. I mean, you can't get that kind of a savings or return on, you know, on your dollar very easily. I think the concern that I have is that, you know, it's going to increase our obligation annually by $200,000 if we go to 20 years, because we're going to, like doing a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30. You're going to pay more every month, but you're going to save interest over the 15-year period, a heck of a lot of interest, and that's really what we're talking about here. So if we're going to need to, that's where the risk is if there's a downturn. And I don't think we're going to have hopefully not a disastrous kind of recession, but California, and I know this, we all know this from our paying attention to what goes on in our city, our state. California and the country go through cycles, and there's going to be an economic cycle that'll be somewhat recessionary, where our revenues are going to drop. They always do every 5 to 7, 8 years. So the question is whether we can maintain that fixed. Now it's fixed. If we fix it at 20 every year, we're going to have that additional 200,000 más o menos obligation, which means we're going to have to be prepared to either increase revenue to cover that. And there are various schemes we talked about at the retreat for doing that, which is good. So I feel confident we can probably do it. But when we lose revenue from other sources during a recession, that including TOT, because there'll be fewer people spending money on vacations, then we have to actually think about a plan B. But I think it's too good an opportunity for us to pass up with 30 years and much less return on this investment. One of the other things quickly we talked about was using some of this money to put in a high yield fund to help us with the maintenance of Palm Avenue Route 75, because this was actually money that was going to be, amortized over many years. Caltrans said that this would be the present value of the maintenance over many years of Route 75. That's another expense that we're going to have to incur in addition to the increased payments here if we go to 20 years. So I just think when we're going through the budget process that we're about ready to start, we need to forecast what these additional obligations are going to be and how we're going to be able to budget for them over the 2 year, and hopefully we go out 5 years with our forecasting and have some answers. But as of now, I think we should go to the 20 years.
On the other hand,
but yeah, I agree. But let's look at the alternative, and the alternative is Stockton, Vallejo, and other cities that
San Bernardino, you can name
that hit the wall at some point because city councils didn't bite the bullet on holding down their cost of employment, which is the biggest single item in the city budget, except for the cost of public safety, and didn't get ahead of their pension obligations, which is what we're trying to do. So to me, the greater risk is that some future council is going to find itself in a position of not being able to meet its obligations, and NIB will be in a real crisis. If we do this, the probability of that is way lower, and that's, I think, what we should go for, is a much lower probability of that kind of future crisis.
And both well said. I at the workshop, I liked the 30 year, and I still do, and for almost the same reasons you're saying, because it's our obligation as city council members, city managers' job is to keep our city afloat. And in 10 years from now, if something does happen and we don't have enough money to pay for it, and Mayor, you mentioned we have to cut services, cut employees. That $200,000 extra right now, just talking about it, doesn't sound like a lot. But we have employees that work for us that we want to keep, and we want to make sure that they have good pay. And if we have to start going, well, you know what, and during negotiations, this extra $200,000, I'm sorry, we can't put that sidewalk in, we can't put that alley in, we can't put that new fitness park in, because every year we're 200,000 plus. And I realize that we're getting extra money. My mortgage at my house, I pay 15-year mortgage. And let me tell you, it's tight, and it's hard, and I definitely don't make any extra payments. But I like the 30 for those reasons. Our obligation for the people that are going to be sitting up here in 10 years, I'd hate for them to say, what did those guys do? What did those council members do? What did they get us into? So that's my main reason for liking the 30 year. And so I value both of your comments.
Can I just add to that? I also think that it could be the case that in 20 years, the council will be thinking, why didn't they go for the 20 year as well? I don't know. We're between a rock and a hard place because there's a lot of uncertainties. And I think the one thing that I can see that's certain is that we'll have a significant savings if we go with 20 year. There are all these variables that we cannot account for because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I do know that it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me to go for the 20-year and be fiscally responsible and bite this, nick this in the butt, because at the end of the day, there's so many cities that are really in crisis. I mean, we talked about it at MTS. I mean, PEPRA is one of their priorities, legislative priorities for this year, the League of Cities. Same thing. I mean, nationwide. So I think we need to have the courage, the political courage to make these hard decisions. And that's why we were elected. And I'm leaning towards supporting your guys' recommendation of 20 years.
Speaker.
Oh, I thought it was on. Sorry. What's going to happen with CalPERS in the future? Their trend line has been to go from 7.5, which was overly ambitious and created problems, to, because they weren't making that over a long period of time, to now 7.0. And now everybody is in a greater crisis. If they just drop to 6.75 or 6.5, it's another big chunk that is going to be added to our unfunded liability. So to me, that is a more palpable risk to me, given CalPERS's behavior and the potential lower returns they're going to get on their portfolio if there is a downturn, than the likelihood that we're not going to be able to maintain an additional $200,000 out of our general fund budget every year. We can find ways. I agree with Councilman Patton that we don't want to lay off staff, but we also want to be able to take care of staff's pension obligations, right? And maintain a viable financial municipality. And I think that we can make a budgetary adjustment within that margin of, $200,000, $500,000, et cetera, when we need to. It's when we have big crises like this coming due, or something catastrophic that's in the millions that we have to come up with money for, then we've really got problems. And it seems to me that those are less likely. Those kinds of big problems are less likely if we stay ahead of our pension unfunded obligations, especially because Caltrans is, who can trust them to stay where they are right now? It's more likely they're going to go down further than up,
Caltrans.
I'm sorry, CalPERS.
Both.
Either one of them. I did the same thing at the retreat.
We got the money from Caltrans, but we're paying CalPERS.
The CalPERS rates have never gone up. They have reduced, and I think we were looking today at all of our different bases, and there have been reassessments at least 3 times in the last 10 years or so. And so they've gone, I think, actually from 8 down to 7 in different scenarios. Now, I'm not even going to look to my right, because I'm surprised she's not laughing out loud. I will tell you that Erica's suggestion was to go with the 20, just because, again, and as a city manager, I was just hoping for that flexibility, because I fully trust council members to always do the right thing and to be very responsible as we start to pay this down. But it certainly gave some flexibility. But I understand that flexibility comes with a price also. That in future times and future councils may use that money differently than the way you intended. So, I understand. Now, I should also say one other thing, and that is when we're talking about the 200,000, remember, as we pay off a couple of these bases, we also save a couple $100,000 a year on what we have to send. So in some ways it might be somewhat revenue neutral or expense neutral. And we've got some other backup slides if you want to see all the gross detail.
Yeah. So I can't pull it up. What was the staff's recommendation?
to main,
Well, tonight's,
To-
that's a good point.
right. So the
Tonight-
staff recommendation was to make a payment.
Yeah, that,
Yeah,
Yes, we make the payment, but
Yeah.
did you have a recommendation on the
No,
30/20
we did
repayment?
not.
No.
You did
No,
not.
again,
tonight's just the resolution, but this is a great discussion.
management agrees both ways, honestly.
Okay.
But
Because-
I think it's important for me to note though, that once if the council decides to go to a 20-year, we can go back. It's not regret.
So the way I look at it is, I saw this presentation last week for about 40 minutes. I'm seeing it today for about 30 minutes. How many hours did you guys put in this?
Oh,
That's not
Like,
ours.
give-
It's more
give
like
me-
we-
I looked at my emails. I think we
How
started
long?
working on this in August
August or
last
September.
year.
Long
So,
time.
so you guys know a little more than us on this, would you say?
Andy's the expert.
Drip under pressure.
Okay. That, I mean, that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So I know is there a motion to approve this? Councilmember Aguirre?
Can I make one clarifying statement, because that was a really good point. Tonight's request is approval to send the payment so that we can get all this started. As we prepare the 2-year budget, we can have the discussion about whether or not we should be preparing for a 20-year or a 30-year amortization. And any time we can reduce it to a 20-year, like Erica said, you can't undo it and take it back to 30. So we can discuss that during the budget.
So, oh, go ahead.
In the meantime, what can we find out a little more about the 20 versus 30, and maybe if we get some little more nuts and bolts,
I
you know,
can
and
answer
then,
that.
and then we could maybe make a more informed decision.
Quite
Yeah.
easy to come up with those
I can
numbers.
answer that. Actually, there's actuarials that we can obtain from that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, just
And-
my comment is that I can
back.
see both sides of that discussion. And, 20 years doesn't seem that long ago to me. I bought my house in 2000 and we did a 30-year mortgage and then refinance. I wish we kind of, well, things are always tight when you have kids, right? So, but 10 years doesn't seem like that far away now, right? And so I can see council members in 20 years going, oh my God, why did they decide to keep making us pay that $5 million? Or somebody who just had a kid right now, or, going to have kids, and they're going, and then their kids grow up and they're going, wow, that's a whole skate park we could have had. So, I mean, but it goes both ways too, or, so anyway, I can see it both ways.
Yeah, I just asked Erica to pull this up real quick. These are each one of our bases, and there's 84 of these. But we just pulled one out as an example, and the only reason I pulled it up is the chart up on the upper right. The chart on the upper right is what really tells the story. You can see the immediate drop with the 5.3, and then it goes down. You can see it pays off, about 12 years sooner, and everything between the two lines is what you save. But I think that displays it. So if you go with a 20-year, your light blue line just drops further, and you just have more savings.
So I think, first of all, just to make sure we're clear, it took 4 years to get, if not more, to get Caltrans and the state and the governor to relinquish the road. No, Caltrans relinquished the road.
Yeah. Sorry, didn't hear
4
you.
years of negotiations was the first thing I did as mayor, was to meet with Caltrans to talk about that with Lori Berman, who now became the director of Caltrans and a state senator. So, that involved Tony Atkins and the governor. So that took a long time. And then this creative way of solving this problem. So I think the city staff, but also this council, is to be commended for figuring this out, because it was Orange County back in the 90s. Remember that? San Diego County, I think, pretty much went bankrupt. And you're right, Stockton, they did go bankrupt.
I'm so glad you guys are getting ahead of this.
Right,
This is going to
because-
be great for this
And
community.
everyone is dealing with this, and some people are failing to address it. So
I know you'd rather spend the money on outdoor parks and think this is the right thing to do for them.
right. So there was a motion in a second. Is that right?
I don't know if there was. To tell you the
So-
truth. I don't think.
So let me read that. You're right. So I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-8022. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please vote.
Motion carried unanimously.
Great. Adjourn the regular meeting, and we're not having the closed session.
Right.
I'm sorry.
We're not?
No,